Jesus. There's power in the name of.
We want to begin hopefully this I could share today and then be completed. I want to talk about releasing the power of acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is an important ingredient in human relationships and really in success, in being able to resolve issues, to overcome difficulties and struggles. There's some necessity of acknowledging things. Like we're dealing with this pandemic at this time, this virus, the Delta virus, the variant of the coronavirus, COVID-19. And there has been this battle that's going on, and it is yet going on. Some that do not acknowledge that there is this dangerous virus that is going around, and that people are susceptible of contracting this virus and becoming very deadly. And then also there is this really rumors that are going about the vaccinations and the vaccine that have been developed to try to address it and to make our ability to return to operation and normality, hasten. The fact that people fail to acknowledge it, the fact that they are unwilling to accept that a vaccine has been developed that could address it, does not eliminate that there is a virus and a vaccine.
That's right. That's right.
I read a story on yesterday. Matter of fact, I saw the video of a woman giving her personal testimony. She's from Florida. Her husband was a pastor. They have a son that's 13 years old and a daughter that's 18 years old. And the daughter is away in college. But earlier in the year, when the vaccine became available, they determined to get the vaccine, all of the family members. But then the father became reluctant and resisted and really became very belligerent and determined not to take this virus because of many of the conspiracies that were going on. And what happened over the last month or so, the son, the mother, and the husband contracted this virus. But because the son and the mother had the vaccine, the symptoms only displayed themselves as a cold. However, the father, who had been so determined and resistant to receiving the vaccine, he developed the virus in its full-blown stage. And as he laid there on the bed in the hospital, he was now apologizing to his family, apologizing to them because he failed to get the vaccine. And he said that when he recovered that he would get the vaccine. However, he failed to recover. He died earlier this month. And the mother now is sharing her story about this family situation, about someone that acknowledged the dangers that was prevalent in our society as a result of the vaccine, of the virus, and then also a way of trying to mitigate and to limit the impact of the vaccine by getting the vaccine. So she's sharing that and how it has, the ability to acknowledge or failure to acknowledge how it impacted their life and their family. And then everything that goes on in this world really impacts us in some way based on our willingness to either acknowledge or not acknowledge something. Today I want to talk about acknowledgement, and I want to talk about it from the perspective of God. I understand that human acknowledgement is important. No one likes to be ignored. No one likes to be looked over. We don't like to be tossed aside and discredited or diminished in ability to appreciate us and what we have to offer. But when you show acknowledgement, in most cases, particularly when people are able to recognize that it's a genuine acknowledgement, there is a positive response in most situations. It happens with dogs and cats. You got them around your house and they want your attention, and that's what they said, acknowledge my presence. And they want you to show that by demonstrating some kind of interaction with them. And we do that with our children as well. Acknowledgement is important. It is vital to help build their self-esteem when a parent fully acknowledges their child, acknowledges their love, their willingness to support, and their value. So this capacity, this power of acknowledgement, it reaches very deeply into the very essence of the human spirit and soul. On your job, it's amazing how powerful that a thank you, a genuine thank you is. Based on studies and when they have done these surveys, they have found out that in many cases, an employee would rather have the genuine acknowledgement and acceptance of their employer or their manager rather than the money that they're offering, as something to try to placate or to recognize their efforts. Just the acknowledgement, just being able to say thank you. And it's interesting that you could be on a job, you could be making 6 or 7 figures, and we see it. We see it there with our athletes that makes hundreds of millions of dollars. We see it with those that are movie stars, those that have high positions and professional positions and employment. Though they're making that kind of money, it's amazing how many of them feel unappreciated because there's not a word acknowledging their value and appreciation for their offering. So they're receiving the check, but there's something missing. There's something broken. There's something empty on the inside because that human connection by acknowledging me is not really being satisfied. So this is a deep spiritual necessity for acknowledgement, and it's the cause where many are finding themselves at the point of committing suicide, point of giving up and walking out of relationships, families being broken apart and separated because there is not a full acknowledgement of someone, children running away, spouses seeking affection in the arms of another because the failure to acknowledge their spouse or being acknowledged by their spouse. And it happens also on our spiritual connection with God, where people feel abandoned, they feel alone, they feel left out, they feel that they have been cast aside because they're wondering, God, where are you? Where are you? Well, why am I battling and going through my crisis alone? Why in the circumstance that I'm experiencing is not being resolved? Lord, why are you not answering and responding to my prayer? They're looking for acknowledgement from God. And when a person really have a sense that God is acknowledging them and showing a response to them, it's amazing how they could endure the most severe, unpleasant situations. They could go through dangers and trouble and crises long as they know that God is on their side. The Bible says this here, if God be for me, who will be against me? This the real essence of that scripture is saying it doesn't matter the opposition, it doesn't matter the problem. All of those things are inconsequential if I got God on my side. I don't mind facing the crowds and I may be alone. Look, I got God on my side. I may be facing bankruptcy and facing health issues, but Lord, I got God on my side. And I know that He's on my side. There's something powerful about acknowledgement. Especially about acknowledgement of God. There's a power that's released in us when we are really able to appreciate the acknowledgement that we receive by God. And the thing about it is that we're willing to go to lengths that we otherwise would not even attempt because of our acknowledgement that God is with us. And God's aware of it. And we're going to talk about this power of acknowledgement and how critical it is to our lives and to our success and our ability to experience the fullness that God would have us to experience. So please take notes and be aware of the power of acknowledgement, because that is going to be the key in many cases that allows us to survive many of the challenges that we're facing. In Acts chapter 16, verse 23, it says this. And when they had laid many stripes upon them, they cast them into prison, charging the jailer to keep them safely, who having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison and made their feet fast in the stocks. And at midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises unto God. And the prisoners heard them. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, so that the foundation of the prison was shaken. And immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bands were loosed. We are presented here with an incident in the life of Apostle Paul. He's there in this city, and he's caring about the Lord's business. He's fulfilling the call and the charge and the commission that God gave him. And while in the act of carrying out his assigned duty by God, he now is accosted. He's grabbed, he's arrested, he is threatened, he's beaten, him and Silas. And then they're thrown into prison. He's ill-treated. He's not given the proper level of care and proper respect that is due him. He's ill-treated. But yet, they're there in this prison. Now, please do not try to imagine a prison as we know it today, where though we have some very bad prisons with some very bad conditions, but nothing compared to the prisons of those days. They didn't have air conditioning. They did not have a cot, you know, with a fluffy cot. Notice that they were not only in prison, but they were tied down, they were chained down. But even before that, they were beaten. And so there was no appeal to the courts for inhumane treatment. But he's caring about God's business. He's on God's assignment. And in the midst of carrying out the work that he has been charged with, he is being ill-treated. But he is aware that he is acknowledged by God. Because he begins to pray and sing songs in the midst of this crisis. So let's look at this acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is consenting to receive or undertake something that is offered. So when Paul accepted God's invitation to become his apostle, his carrier of the good news of the gospel to the Gentile world, he was willing to consent and accept it and to receive it. Acknowledgement means an agreement with or a belief in an idea, in an opinion or an explanation. So he had to acknowledge what the gospel of Jesus Christ was, because that is what he was charged with carrying. He admitted there in Romans chapter 1 verse 16, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation. So he acknowledged that the power of salvation was in Jesus Christ. Then another definition for acknowledgement is willingness to tolerate a difficult or unpleasant situation. While they're in the prison, we don't see Paul arguing. We don't see him fighting. We don't see him complaining. We don't see him murmuring and then calling God to task. Say, wait a minute, God. I didn't sign up or enlist for this. Lord, listen. Long as things going well, I didn't mind preaching the gospel. I didn't mind living right. I didn't mind doing right. But now, Lord, things have changed. When situations are not favorable to us, do we change? Do we now fail to acknowledge God and his call? Acknowledgement is the idea. It's not merely to grudgingly. It's not to grudgingly tolerate negative experiences, but to embrace them fully and without defense.
Yes.
So when you are, and I'm talking about our relationship with God, our connection with God, when we are addressing this, that we, because of this spiritual empowerment that we have, we don't do what God called us grudgingly. It is bad when a preacher is forced to preach.
Yes.
When he don't willingly look forward to the opportunity to share the good news. He looks for ways to avoid his responsibility. That's bad. When you grudgingly called to carry out what a Christian is required to do, that's not acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is saying, Lord, listen, the situation may not be to my liking, but I'm going to do it.
That's right. Amen.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to carry it out. I'm going to fulfill the calling you have on my life. Listen to what the Alcoholics Anonymous have written in their big book, in their 4th edition on page 417, what they say about acknowledgement. See, and this is what someone is giving, and when they have to confess. When I stopped living in the problem and began living in the answer, the problem went away. From that moment on, I have not had a single compulsion to drink. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake.
Amen.
Word. This is what is written in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, what they must study and internalize. And he goes on to say, after that, that nothing, absolutely nothing happens in this world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitude. That deserves some contemplation and some thought process, because we're looking at what the alcoholics are saying, but that same mindset is transferable to any given situation we are confronted with. And we adapt that mindset, it would really revolutionize our ability to handle every matter that come our way. So when it comes to acknowledgement, it is to understand the importance of acceptance. It's recognition, the gifts of acceptance. It's to recognize the gifts of acceptance. It's to embrace the freedom of acceptance. It is, after acceptance comes gratitude. Yes, I was ahead of myself. Yes. So we have to understand this here. Acknowledgement means to simply see things as they are, whether you like it or not. To see that they are. I may not like my situation, but I see it as it is. But once you get to the place of acknowledgement, once you resolve in your mind and your spirit that it is what it is, acknowledgement makes people feel they matter. Well, when you have a sense that God is aware of your presence and aware of you, it gives you a sense that you matter, that you are not some insignificant being. Though there are billions of people on this world, God wants you to know that you matter. That you matter. Acknowledgement elevates a person's value. It allows you to have a sense that someone appreciates what you have to offer, and not only what you have to offer, but also appreciate the fact that you have something and you are something. Acknowledgement opens the doorway for communication and sharing. And that's the beautiful thing. Because when we acknowledge God and we go to Him in prayer, all of a sudden now you're saying, Lord, listen, I need to interact. I need to communicate. I need to have a transference of information between me and you so that I can have the matters addressed. The things that need to be dealt with in my life, I need your help and assistance. God, because you know I exist, because you know I belong to you, Lord, I'm looking for you to me out. Acknowledgement strengthens the bonds of connection. When I know God cares about me, when I know God watches out for me, oh my God, it connects the bonds that I have with Him. Acknowledgement stimulates motivation to fulfill purpose. Yes, and I'm going to tell you, on my job, every time they gave some kind of letter of appreciation, it stimulated me. And I mean, those letters of appreciation, sometimes they came with some financial compensation, but many times they didn't. But when they did not, I still appreciated getting that letter. Said, listen, Emanuel, we acknowledge what you have, the role you play in this organization. We acknowledge the capacity and the potential that you have presented and you have put forth. We acknowledge your effort and your labor, and we acknowledge your sacrifice. It made me feel good that they recognized and they were willing to put it in writing and make it public.
Yes.
Acknowledgement stimulates your motivation, and therefore it incited me and made me want to work harder. Acknowledgement, it combats feelings of isolation and abandonment. So that's why God every now and then has to touch our lives, has to allow us to have intimacy and fellowship with us. That's why He calls us to Him. He beckons us to come to Him. Why? Because He don't want us to feel isolated and abandoned. And if any Christian, if anyone that say that they are a believer is expressing a sense of isolation and abandonment, that means that there's a broken connection between them and their God.
Yes.
Because God calls us. He calls us. Maybe at an inconvenient time, maybe a time where you're preoccupied with something else, but He calls us. And He lets us know, listen, come. Come, I need to recharge you. I need to reaffirm my acknowledgement of you.
Yes.
Acknowledgement of our need of God. And this is what God does to share that we need Him. He acknowledges that. He knows that. He knows our weaknesses. He knows our flaws. He knows our failures. He knows the things that have gone wrong in our life. He knows the things where our hurts and our pains is. And so therefore, He addresses it. He acknowledges our weakness, but the way He acknowledges it is that He said, listen, I'm going to make available to you what you need so that you could overcome whatever lack you think you're experiencing and you have. He says, so now you acknowledge what I'm offering to you and that I can do what you cannot do for yourself. He said, listen, we can do something. We can face any old thing. Once you recognize that you are weak and I am strong.
Yes. Yes.
Look what He says in Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10. It says this here, Isaiah 41, verse 10, fear not thou, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, yea, I will help you, yea, I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. So God is saying, listen, I know that you have this human tendencies, these human frailties, the things that make you susceptible to some of the trappings of this world. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to strengthen you. You're looking at things and you're intimidated by them, but He said, I got you in this. Don't feel that you are in it all by yourself. And I understand that there's some of you that are saying, listen, I'm fighting this battle all by myself. People have abandoned me. I don't see God anywhere, so now I'm going through this all by myself. Please don't ever get to that state and don't stay there. If you find yourself at a point where you feel that God has tossed you aside and the world has forgotten about you, please understand you must get out of that condition. You must change your mind. You must get a focus on God and realize that God is yet there with you. Notice what it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 in verse 4 and 5. It says this. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4 and 5, it says, and I'm reading from the English Revised Version. The English Revised Version. We could say this, because through Christ we feel sure before God. I don't mean that we are able to do anything good ourselves. It is God who made us able to do all that we do.
Yes.
That is acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that what we are insufficient in the areas of our failures and our flaws and our weaknesses, God makes up the difference and more. And when there is this sense in us that we could do things our way, that we could carry out our own agenda, that we could do and operate and function based on our own perceptions, that is when we are failing to acknowledge the qualities and the things that God adds to the equation. When there is a challenge in your life, when there is difficulties that you're going through, realize that God is there to reassure you and to reaffirm you that you're not in it by yourself. And the miracles that God do, and I'm pretty sure that many of you have at some point in your life had confronted something that you realized was too big for you. But somehow God stepped in. Somehow he made a way. He may have used somebody else. He may have allowed the vessel or the vehicle or the method to be done by a human being, but it was God that was motivating it. It was God that was behind it and inciting that person to operate on your behalf. Sometimes when someone comes to rescue you, it is not because that they wanted to, but the favor of God that was intervening on your behalf. We have to appreciate when everything good happens to us, God is the one operating. God is moving. God is functioning. God is causing things to happen. Even when we are oblivious to everything else, God is there. So we look at Colossians chapter 2. Colossians chapter 2. Verse 2, it says this. That their hearts might be comforted, being knit together in love, and unto all riches of the full assurance of understanding, to the acknowledgement of the mystery of God and of the Father and of Christ. When we are able to acknowledge God, we acknowledge his wonder work, we now receive insight into the mystery of God. Things that cannot be known by searching books. You could search all your life, and you could have PhDs in various disciplines, but not until you are willing to acknowledge God can you get an understanding into the mystery of God. And so that is why some grandmother that dropped out of school or maybe never attended school but came into faith and confidence in God, how they're able and were able to see miracles occur in their life and on their behalf because they acknowledged God. They realized that they didn't have the education. They realized that they didn't have the financial resources. They realized that they did not have the preferential treatment and the favor of man. But they had God on their side. Some of us got to have a testimony. From your grandma, from your mama, from your dad, from some relative or friend. That you got to have a testimony about when they did not have the education and then their children was able to go to school because they were willing to trust God and believe God. That if they held on to God, if they followed the guidance of God and they worked and they put forth their effort and they sold into their children, and now they see their children being educated and graduating from college, knowing that there's a God. When they were able to take care of 5 and 10 and 15 kids. And we can't take care of one right now. There was a God on have even some of the Caucasians. They went through some bad times. They went through some situations. They went through some circumstances that was very difficult. And they prayed to God as well. And they believed God. And God moved in their families just as well. So it doesn't matter your nationality. It doesn't matter your race. God acknowledges everybody that recognizes Him. God honors those. And I mean, he picks us out. Look at what He did for the Jews. It's amazing what He did for the Jews who were yet around when they have been threatened, when they've been beaten, when they've been people tried to exterminate them. And here they are, thousands of years later, yet thriving. While those nations that tried to extinguish them have been obliterated off the face of the earth. That's what it means to acknowledge God and to have Him on your side. Well, see,
Say it again, Jesus. There's power in the name